Niners! Hey, fam, look at this. Already, you're worried about the pain and struggle getting into the offseason, how long it's going to be because you left all PO because of the way we made an exit this year. And here we are already back in we're getting ready to get started again. I got Tony here for the first week of the Red Gold GM. And Tony, come on in. Tony goes back like, Tony, you started, were you in junior high school? And hello, by the way.
No, I was middle school. I was like 8th grade, I think.
And Tony, what year of college you in now, or did you just graduate?
So I'm taking a gap year, but when I go back, I'll be a sophomore.
See, that's the thing, Tony, and what I love about Tony is, of all the Red Gold GMs we've had, Tony would be the guy that would set the chat on fire, set the comment section on fire. People would be saying all kind of vicious things, and Tony's very cool and calm about it. But here's the thing. Tony, even in the 49ers draft room, whoever's in that room, they're not agreeing upon everything.
Yeah,
can
absolutely.
You imagine? I truly believe within my heart of hearts that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch had to argue about Mac Jones. And Big Show, you can't convince him of anything else. And so, and I just wonder how many years that Kyle Shanahan has a compromise. And if not this year, other years, because I got a feeling Kyle wants to go more offense, and John's being the level head in the room saying, now kind of, we're only gonna win if we've got a solid defense, and history points to that and those type of things, So
yeah.
But anyway, Tony, we're gonna get started with you. Here's what we're gonna do tonight, Tony, because people call in, they don't tend to, they're all going all over the place. So I'm gonna tell you right now, if you're on the chat, and I'll repeat this, put Q and put the question. Tony's usually watching the rolling chat anyway, and and he'll address your questions as we go. All right. With that said, Tony, we are ready, man, for another one of those controversial drafts that I love so much.
All right. I'm ready for it, too. I've been this whole week, I've just kind of been looking at the players and thinking, how can I maximize the value here? But if you don't have any more closing thoughts, Ronbo, I'll get started.
All right. In fact, Tony's one of the most detailed people you're ever going to see. This is why I can't wait to hear from him every year. Tony goes deep into it. You'll see. Tony, you're on.
All right. So our first pick is 61. And quite frankly, I think if you move up or move down, it's better than sitting there, because the players between, I think, 70 to 120, that's where the meat of this draft is. So if you can get more picks in that area, you're going to find a lot of guys that maybe slid and they probably should have gone second round, but you can get them late in the third round. So from 61, I'm moving back, and we're going to trade back with Baltimore, and I'm giving them pick 61, pick 220, and then a 5th round pick next year. And then in return, I'm going to get pick 76 and 100. So I'm trading back 15 spots, and with some, late round picks, I'm also picking up pick 100. All these trades that I'm doing are verified by the trade value chart that the Cowboys used predominantly in the 90s. So everything I'm doing is referenced from that. So with pick 76, this is a guy that he's one of my favorite players in the entire draft. He reminds me a lot of Jaquiski Tart, and I know Chris Sims comped him to Harrison Smith, but we're going to go with Bryan Cook out of Cincinnati. And to me, I'm just going to say it outright. He is the best run fitter in the entire draft in terms of when you're playing a strong safety spot, if you can fill the C&D gap predominantly, first and second down to stop them, third downs become way easier for your defense. And to me, he does it at an exceptional level. He's an elite tackler. You really won't get by him very often. And he breaks down really well to where you can't move by him. And even when he's getting blocked by offensive linemen, there's very few times where you feel like they're in control. Even if he's not disengaging immediately, you can tell he's just setting them up to quickly go after the running back once he gets in striking distance. So in terms of the run game, he is elite. But to me, he's more than just a box safety, because he has the range to play anywhere in the defense, in my opinion. You can line him up in the slot. You can play him as a free safety. You can play him in the box as a strong safety. But to me, you put him anywhere, he's going to perform for you, much like Tart, to where he's very versatile. Maybe he's not getting all those interceptions, and that's one of the knocks I have on him. And we'll go into that. But he's really a guy to where if you ask him to do his assignment, that guy's going to be done for. He's not going to get open the whole way through. So again, the versatility to me is what makes him such a good fit in the system, because we play a lot of quarters and cover 3. So if you can play single high or in the box, or even just play as a split safety, like a lot of the times it's going to benefit the defense. Going on with that, he has really good size. And honestly, I think he ran like a 4.5 something at the 40, but he runs like a 4.3, low 4.4 guy on film. And he might have been the fastest player on the defense, even with a Sauce Gardner holding down a cornerback spot there. But to me, he was right there with him in terms of speed. And you're really not going to get, beat vertically with him. He's really good about keeping the play in front of him and making a play when it's there. To me, again, he has really good instincts. His hips, the one thing about his hips, it's like when you're moving vertically down the field, I felt like they were a lot better than horizontal, moving side to side. So that's something that he can improve with. But again, in terms of just being the guy who can take care of all of his responsibilities, tackle really well, and be a force in the run game, I don't think you're going to find many guys as good as him, even at like 60 and, let alone 76. So to me, he's really good. I guess some of the negatives, he's new to safety. So I feel like even though he's a smart football player, his IQ isn't on par with a guy like Tart or Harrison Smith yet, just because he's only been playing safety really for a year and a half. So he can definitely improve there. I talked about the playmaker thing a little bit. He will lock you down, but I guess in the NFL, if you want to get interceptions, you kind of have to cheat a little bit and kind of, read the quarterback and see where he's going to throw the ball and make instincts, I guess, off of that. And there were instances of that on film, but just not enough for me. And you can see it to where, he had a couple picks this past year, but he probably could have had a little bit more if he was more aggressive attacking the football. But I'd rather have a guy be in position, because the hardest part is being in position. You can teach a guy how to be aggressive at the catch point. You can't teach a guy how to be step for step with someone 30 yards down the field. And then, I guess that's all the negatives for me. He's a really good player. I generally could see him in the top 40, even though I could see him sliding back to even 80 or 90 as well. I think he'd be worth a top 40 pick. But based on how the board's going to fall out, I think 76 is where he's going to go. So that's it for him.
And Tony, you seem to be anticipating that Kowalski Tart probably won't be re-signed this year to join the 49ers?
I highly doubt it. I mean, they brought in George Odom as a special teamer, and Tart would have been back for a minimum deal if they wanted him there. I don't really think he has a market, and a lot of safeties don't have a market right now, but I don't think he's coming back. I think they want to get young, and they've kind of proved that this offseason, because the team has been getting older every year. They kind of need to, drop their age a bit so it's more sustainable.
Understood.
Yeah.
All right. Continue.
So the next pick we would have is 93, but I'm actually going to trade up, and I'm going to keep pick 93, and I'm going to move up for pick 83. So the trade I have here is we're going to send pick 83, we're going to send pick 100 and a 3rd round pick next year. The reason why I want to use a 3rd round pick is because we already have 2 comp picks.
So many.
Yeah, we have one for Mike McDaniel and then one for the Martin Mayhew / Robert Saleh offseason. And we could have a 3rd if D'Amico Ryans is hired next offseason. So to me, giving up those 3rd round picks isn't a massive deal. And I'd rather have them this year.
Yeah,
exactly. And in return, Philly's going to give us pick 83 and a 5th round pick next year. So the 5th round pick we gave up to Baltimore, we're basically getting it back. So all we've lost so far is a 3rd round pick next year, but we're moving up the board in the 3rd round, and we're going to have 3 more picks in the 3rd. So the next guy here, Kellen Diesch, tackle out of Arizona State. To me, one of the more important things about translating to the NFL is short area quickness as a tackle, because if you get beat right off the rip in pass protection, if you're slow, that guy's getting by you. But if you can move quickly, you can reset your base and you'll be fine. And here he ran a 4.89 40 at 6'7", 303, which he looks kind of slender, almost like a Mike McGlinchey, that type of build. But to me, I think he's a little bit thicker, and he's a lot faster than McGlinchey as well. The 20-yard shuttle, he ran a 4.43, which is like DB type numbers. And that's kind of where the short area quickness kind of comes into play, and where you can see that specific combine thing translating to the NFL. So just aside from that, him as a player, he didn't lose a single rep in pass protection at the Shrine Bowl, which is not, I guess, as highly touted as a Senior Bowl, but it's still very important because you have a lot of guys coming into the league that play there, some of the best players, and he didn't let up a single time in pass protection. Something that I really like with him as well is the fact that he's great at getting out into space, and he's perfect for the zone run, outside zone.
Yeah.
And we saw with Tom Compton last year, even though he wasn't very skilled, he was so fast that a couple times it was him and one guy down the field, right? And you just couldn't do anything about it. And then Debo obviously comes behind him, Mitchell comes behind him, and there's really not much else to say about that. He was getting out there. So a guy like Kellen Diesch, in my opinion, where he can move that quickly, but he's also a lot more skilled, and his, I guess, size is a lot better for being a starting right tackle in football. To me, that's where I think he's worth 83, and that's why we're trading up for a tackle. We really don't know what Mike McGlinchey is going to be like, because he might not ever play again because of his injury. So it's important to at least try to get someone in here. Maybe they bring in a veteran after May 2nd, because that's when the compensatory pick situation kind of fizzles out, and those guys don't really count anymore toward that formula. But for now, they need to do something. So Kellen Diesch is my guy. He has good IQ. And there were a couple times where, like, if you had someone like an Abraham Lucas, maybe who's a bit raw at the position, when you saw stunts, Diesch was all over it, and he was really good at identifying those. And it's a very simple thing, but it does confuse players in the NFL. So having a guy who you can bring in, who's kind of well equipped to defend that right away, is awesome. But for the negatives, I have a few negatives with him. Again, like McGlinchey, I feel like he needs to put on a little more weight, bulk up a little bit more. He doesn't really set his anchor very well in pass protection, and his saving grace is kind of his really good short area quickness. But I feel like if his base was better and he anchored, a little bit better, it would be a lot easier for him not to have to adjust every other play in pass protection.
See, Tony, what you're pointing to, it can be fixed. Diet,
Exactly.
workout, training system, also coaching tips. Yeah, that could be fixed. He's got natural ability. If he's got explosiveness, you're over the hump already. So I like it.
Exactly. Yeah, and like even a guy like David Bakhtiari coming out for Green Bay, his biggest thing in pass protection wasn't he was mauling dudes and they just couldn't run by him because he was so big. It was the fact that he was so good adjusting to counters because he was so quick and he had good hand placement. That's why he panned out as a 4th-round pick. So that's kind of where I'm going with Kellen Diesch here. But he lacks power again just because of his size. He's kind of slender a little bit, and he's fast, but he doesn't really have the Trent Brown type of power that you might want. But again, you really can't find guys like Trent Williams who are super fast and super quick, and they're also like 330.
Huge. Hey, John, you know what's so funny? Because, and I noticed you're making sure, and keep in mind in this chat, and everybody's watching, Tony's actually looking at picks that actually fit the Shanahan system. That's where there's going to be questions, because we're going to look at that guy and say he's a little small. Shanahan guys are usually a little more streamlined. You don't see the big, bulky, meaty guys on Kyle Shanahan's offensive line. There's a reason for that, and you know what it is already. They got to get out in space, and they got to do things for our running backs to do their thing. Go ahead, Tony. I know I see what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And the last thing I kind of have here, he has 32-inch arms, which is kind of really bad for a 6'7" tackle. It's definitely a limitation, but I think with his size overall and his quickness, it won't be as big of a deal. But it is kind of a concerning thing because you want your tackles to have long arms so they can extend a bit further. But aside from that, I really like him. I feel like he's a guy who played mostly left tackle, but he can, honestly, in my opinion, move over to right tackle, and I don't think it'll be that hard for him. Moving from left to right or right to left is very hard for offensive linemen, but it's really hard to find natural right tackles in the draft because 99% of the guys you're seeing, maybe not 99, but like 90% of the guys you're seeing are left tackles in college, and they have to be moved over.
And so that's the only reason why they got attention in the first place, because they did a good job. You can do a good job on the left side. For some reason, the common line of thinking is, okay, let's move them to the right side. And then Tony, you know what, the footwork and all that, it takes a while to adjust. Hopefully you get at the end, you got a product. So we'll see.
Exactly. But, yeah, that's basically it for him. We're going to move on to pick 93. We were able to keep that with all the trades that we did. And the guy I'm going next is Cole Strange. And I can see a scenario where he is gone. And to me, I don't really know where he's going to go. He could definitely go maybe like 105, 110. But teams liked him at the Senior Bowl and during the combine interview. So I could see a situation where maybe he's gone by 70. I just really don't know. I project that he'll be here at 93. So with him, he's from Chattanooga. And the biggest thing with him is he is so good moving laterally. He's so fluid. That's really his main selling point to teams who are running the outside zone, because he can get out in space so effortlessly and block really well as well. And in terms of like his versatility, he played both guards in college and he played center at the Senior Bowl. So
Oh,
he's kind of doing
yes.
all of it. So if Alex Mack decides he doesn't want to return, I know John Lynch said that, he wanted him to and that he was training like he would. But let's say he doesn't. Here's a guy that I'm comfortable coming in week one and being the starting center for the team. We don't want another situation where you're bringing off guys off the street like in 2020 that just really don't know what they're doing and have no skill or talent. Having a guy like this who can play guard, he can start at right guard maybe for you, but he can also move into center if you need him. To me, that's really valuable, especially for the way this team has kind of not really addressed the interior offensive line very much. So that's kind of where I stand with him. Again, like I said, he's really good. He's very fluid moving laterally. And his short area quickness, just like Kellen Diesch, is off the charts good. It's really a guy to where you can see him translating not only in the run game, but also in pass protection if he fixes a few things. The biggest thing with me is his IQ. He's really good, and he has really good spatial awareness that he knows where guys are going to be before they even get there. And you see that a lot on film with him. And he was really an anchor for the offensive line there, and they were really able to do some good things because of him. And his anchor is really good as well. Unlike Kellen Diesch, once he sets his foot in the ground, it's hard to move him off of his spot. His pad level is really good. His initial punch is awesome as well. And then the last thing, something you cannot teach, something that Diesch doesn't have and maybe you'd like to see a little bit more of. He's a nasty blocker, and he wants to run through you and make you pay for even trying to block him. And that's really where I like him a lot, because I appreciate guys who just want to make you pay. And it's not more about like making the play happen, more as like they just want to ruin your life regardless of what happens.
Anthony Davis, the Rhino. Those are the guys that had that
Mm-hmm.
attitude. I love that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really, really awesome to see from him. But obviously, when you're picking a guy in the third round, there are some negatives. As a pull blocker, even though he gets out in space, a lot of times he knows where the guys are going to be, but he kind of second guesses himself and he's hesitant about where he should go. And then that split second where you're just not reacting can be the difference between a negative 2-yard loss and a 10-yard gain, right? So to me, I'd like to see a little bit more of that. His initial punch is really good, but after that, he struggles to kind of refit his hands in a way. And that is something that can be coached, which again, I'm looking at traits that you can develop into a system, right? I'm not looking for the best technique, but not a lot of talent. So that's something.
And you know, it's funny. That's a good point. There's a fine line. There's some guys that look like absolute hell in the combine every year. I'm a little worried about a few of them that everybody's crazy about, and then they get the NFL. None of it translates. So you're absolutely right. You got to have good sense if you're going to play football, especially at this level.
Exactly. It's very hard as it is to play in the NFL, but you do need that extra little bit of burst from your talent to make it happen. His core strength is kind of subpar. There were times where like his anchor's good, but you're kind of underwhelmed with the way he kind of handles the situation just because he doesn't have the core strength. That's something, again, just bulk up, get maybe like 20 more pounds on you, and then just hit the gym and just focus on your core strength. It's fixable. That's all I'll say. And that's basically all I have for him. I really like him. The comp that I saw a lot was JC Treader. And he was kind of hard. I didn't really want to put that on here, but because he might play center, I had to put that on there. If he does play guard, it could be a completely different player. But there wasn't really anyone that popped out to me that he reminded me of.
All right.
So
remember, if you have any questions for Tony, Q, and we'll see the question, and Tony will notice it as well. All right. Go ahead, Tony. Continue.
Yeah. So our fourth third-round pick of the draft, I know it's a lot of third-round picks, but this is really where the meat of the draft is. We're going to go with Damari Mathis at 105, cornerback out of Pittsburgh. If you're using like PFF, Mock Draft Simulator, they're going to have him at like 260 or 270. That is completely ridiculous. He's, to me, a day two prospect. And I know a lot of people respect Eric Crocker, and he has the same take as well. To me, he is like a K'Wan Williams run type of corner, but in pass coverage, he's like a Rashad Fenton from KC. He's kind of like a hybrid between those two guys. But the most impressive thing was, to me, the fact that he is a willing tackler and he wants to put you on the ground. When he sees you coming, he's going to throw his whole body at you and just not give any care about anything. So to me, that was one of the more impressive things, because you can't teach that mentality. I felt like he was really good fitting in the run as well, being responsible for the gap that he has and just making sure that the play didn't go wrong because of him. It was a really, really good thing in the run game for me just to watch that. Overall, I would say he has good athleticism. You're in a 4.39. He had a 43.5-inch vert, which is awesome. 11.1 broad jump. On the field, I wish that would translate a little bit more. His biggest thing to me is getting beat deep. And the more you get down the field from him, like 20 yards plus, they start to separate more. And then he'll panic a little bit. And then he gets pretty handsy. I would like to see that kind of get fixed. But to me, the root of most of his problems comes from getting beat downfield. But when you're within 20 yards, if he gets his hands on you and press man, he's going to press you into the dirt. And it's really hard to get anything on him outside of that, because unless you beat him off the rip, he's going to press you into the dirt and you're not going to move. So to me, I feel like we're going to start playing more press man with Ambry Thomas and Charvarius Ward. Even Emmanuel Mosley was good in press. So this is kind of a guy that I'm projecting to be a starter in the nickel.
And that's what I was going to ask you about. You're looking for the K'Wan Williams replacement, aren't you? You know what? When you said he gets beat deep downfield, that's what I was saying. Now, wait a minute. We're talking right around the line of scrimmage, midfield. Probably not an issue. The safety should be there available for him. Because K'Wan got burnt up in the CCG for the first time. I've never, Tony, seen K'Wan Williams. I'm still thinking he must have been hurt. I've never seen him get smoked like that for 4 quarters. So, yeah.
So with that,
in the right direction.
It was like I was contemplating whether or not I wanted to put him on here because of that reason, where you have guys like Cooper Kupp who are just going to run slot fades on you and beat you deep that way. I don't want that. But at the same time, when I'm watching him, he's faster than K1 by a lot. And I feel like a lot of it is because he isn't patient enough in press coverage. And then if he gets beat initially, the guys just have separation and they have momentum. He doesn't really have the recovering speed that you want. But if he's like patient with them the whole play, I don't think it'll be a big issue in the NFL. He also has the versatility to move outside if we have injuries and stuff. So I'm not really worried about him outside. It's just like maybe being a bit more patient in the slot. But like I was saying, really confident in press coverage. He wants you to never move an inch off the line. And you can see that alpha mentality in his game. He's really good at disrupting the catch point, something that Bryan Cook maybe could improve with. It's outstanding for him. He's so physical. Once he gets his, eye set on something, he's going to run at you full speed, throw his whole body at you, and disrupt the catch. So to me, those are really good. Like I said, an excellent run defender. In zone coverage, I felt like his read and react was honestly a lot better than I was expecting for a guy who might be a day 3 pick. In terms of playing zone, I feel like there could be instances where he's better. For example, like flood concepts or even like a smash concept where you have a hitch and a deep corner route. There are times where he kind of like floats or he doesn't float back enough, so they hit him over the top. But if he were just to like cover that back guy a little bit more, I feel like he has a short area quickness and the physicality to run up and hit that short route receiver and maybe hold him to like a 3 to 5 yard gain, as opposed to try and play both at the same time and then both are kind of open. So I feel like he could improve with that. The last thing for positives, he had a really strong Senior Bowl. It was really good. He was just playing everywhere, slot, outside, off man coverage, press man, and he was really, really good at the Senior Bowl. So we kind of talked about the negatives a little bit with him. Penalties, like I talked about, because he kind of panics. Once the guys get past him, he gets handsy. Again, that is coachable and fixable at the next level. So I'm not too worried about it because it can be fixed. And then the last thing I have for negatives, his eye discipline could improve. I feel like the quarterback's eyes can be deceptive at times, and he's not really as keen as others as picking up onto that and just kind of feeling where the routes are going to be instead of only watching the quarterback. I feel like it's important to have both of those traits. But aside from that, I really like him.
You can build upon that usually through experience. Most of the league, the best guys that can watch the quarterback's eyes and make a play are usually guys who've been around for a little while. Coming into the league, you probably got to make some adjustments. You don't know who that quarterback is yet. But the guys who know the quarterback, they work him every time they see him, especially within the division, right? So that can be built with time.
Yeah. So, like I was saying, you want to build off traits. You don't want to build off the best technique necessarily if they don't have anything else to go with it. So I'm cool taking him at 105 because really these are guys that you're drafting with traits and hoping that they can become starters. It's not like you're banking on them becoming a starter. So I'm comfortable taking him here. And I think this is kind of where his value is. I wouldn't be surprised if he went around 80 or 90. I also wouldn't be surprised if he fell to like 120 or 130. So that's Damari Mathis from Pittsburgh, a corner. And now we're going to move on to our next pick if you're ready, Rombo.
All right. We are ready.
So the next guy is Amari Barno out of Virginia Tech. I love him. He is, again, a fully trade space prospect. He ran a 4.36 40 at the combine. And you can see that on film. His straight line speed is exceptional. His get off the line is really good. He has really good burst. He explodes off the ball. He has 34-inch arms at 6'5", which is really long for a guy his size playing his position. So again, like if he's engaged with a blocker, maybe he can make a play because his arm is so long. So that's really what I like from a physical standpoint.
Tony, excuse me. Did you say 4.36?
Yeah. At 6'5".
At 6'5".
He played at 235 though, which is kind of concerning.
We're talking about a cornerback.
Oh yeah, he's a DN though.
Wow. Okay. Continue.
But yeah, he's 235 at least at the combine. So you would hope that he puts on maybe 20 more pounds. He might lose like half a second off his 40, but that weight is going to be more important because he gets manhandled sometimes if he doesn't really win off his initial punch. And in the run game too, kind of worrisome. But again, he's a guy that in the 4th round, I have no problem with him being a designated pass rusher for a year and then using that time to bulk up and kind of learn the game a little bit more because he is a bit raw. So just learning how to fill gaps properly, what technique to use, those are things that he can learn in the first year. And to me, there's no better guy to learn from than Chris Kasurik. So if he gets in there for a year, just a designated pass rusher, maybe gets, 6 to 8 sacks in his first year, that to me would be a win.
Yes, absolutely. That's the best we got from. Wasn't it Arden Key that had the most sacks? Anybody not named Nick Bosa as far as playing the edge? So
yeah, but he had most of his work inside at the DT spot,
and then there's that.
He really shined there. I don't know if Barno can play inside, and I don't know if you want him to because his bend is really good, and you kind of want him on the outside going around tackles,
especially with that length.
Exactly, 34-inch arms. Kellen Diesch at 6'7" has 32-inch arms, so there's really a difference there. He has a really good ability to punch and then separate because of his speed and short area quickness. If he punches you and then he gets you off balance, he's running around you, but he also has a really, really good counter spin move to where he makes you think he's going outside, then he hits a spin on you, kind of like what DeMarcus Ware did against Joe Staley in 2014.
Everybody still remembers that move. And Staley was sitting there looking like a question mark. God, nobody forgot that. That's scary. Who?
I could never forget that because it was Joe Staley. Like he's not supposed to let things up, but
never get smoked like that.
Exactly.
I recall that. It's hilarious.
And they kind of beat us to that game. So I want to forget about that moment just because it's not the fondest of memories, but it was really cool to see. And he has that. Again, his dip on the edge to me, it's good. It's not like D4 level, but he can get there with proper coaching, in my opinion, because he has the speed and he has the bend to do it. He just needs to dip a little bit more, and I think that's more technique related. On special teams, he's good. So even if he's a disappointment on the defense, he can still be a good special teamer from day one, in my opinion. Like I talked about before, his straight line speed, he can slash through gaps really quickly. And that's something where if you get a little more weight on him and he's more adept at fitting the run and having more gap integrity, he's a guy who can fly through the edge, maybe against like a tight end in the C gap, and then it's a negative 3-yard loss. So to me, that's where he can develop into a better run defender. I feel like his skill set is perfect for the wide 9 and more specifically with Chris Kasurik because he hasn't really had a lot of guys that have amazing off the charts type of traits. It's more guys that are like, okay, I'm maximizing guys with, good traits, but not great. Imagine what he could do with a guy like this. That's kind of where I stand with.
And Tony, what you're describing sounds a lot like a Monahu, and I really saw something in that guy after a few games. He's got that explosiveness and that wild man thing going on. So yeah, if he reminds you of him and the way you're describing now, which is what I'm listening to, let's look at him.
Yeah, exactly. And the last positive I have, really good lateral mobility. Like it's probably better than Cole Strange on the opposite side of the ball to me. He's so fluid as a player in general. He could legitimately be a tight end in the league and he might go for 1,000 yards. That's how good of an athlete he is. And again, like I could see him going as early as the second round, because if your traits are this good, like, teams will really want you. But he's so raw, so unrefined, and he's really small, honestly. Even though he's 6'5", he's 235. A lot of teams will be scared away by that, and I could see him falling as late as the 5th round. But I really, again, with all these players, you don't know how the draft is going to shake up. A lot of guys you expect to be high are going to fall a couple rounds. Some guys like him might go in the 2nd or 3rd round, so we don't know. But I feel like he will be there at 134, most likely. Now, the last negatives I have for him, again, he's really raw. His hands are unskilled. His gap integrity isn't great. And he's inconsistent setting the edge as well. But again, learning the position to me is more important for him than anything else. And I feel like he'll be able to do that within a year or two and be an overall good player for the Niners. He still is learning the position, again, because he's raw. So I'm not going to expect him to be a starter from day one. And the last thing I'd like to see more of, I feel like he doesn't have a low motor, but he's not relentless on every play like a Nick Bosa is, and maybe like an Arden Key. He's more like an Eric Armstead, where if he misses the first time or maybe doesn't get to the quarterback, there's plays where you feel like he's not really relentless and he might just let the play, happen and see what happens from there. I like to see a little bit more relentlessness from him, but it's not like the defining factor in his game. I think he can be a really good player.
All right. Sounds good to me. All right.
All right. Are we ready for pick 172?
Let's have it.
All right. So this guy here, this to me can be Kyle Juszczyk in a couple years. And from day one, you probably want him as your tight end too, because he played tight end in college, but he's really well versed in every type of block, whether it's a lead block, a sift block, anything like that. He's done it at Maryland. And the guy I'm talking about is Chigoziem Okonkwo. And again, to me, he could be a Delaney Walker type, second tight end on your team, and he can block really well for you from day one. But he can also turn into a Kyle Juszczyk, and that's why I really like this pick, because in the short term, Juice isn't going anywhere. So you need a tight end 2 on your roster, and this guy can be that guy for you. But in the event that we have some type of injury, you can let him play fullback for Juice while he's, getting back up to speed and getting healthy, and he can be that guy for you anyway. Let's say in 3 years, Juice gets injured or something, or maybe they want to move on from him. This guy could be your guy from here on out. And to me, he's so versatile. He ran a 4.52 40 at the combine, fastest out of all tight ends. And he just moves really well in general. So he can be that versatile piece like Juszczyk is, to where line him up in the slot, make him your running back, or he can block for you, anything in between there. Now, again, he has the experience blocking. He's still pretty raw at it, but again, that's something I feel like you can coach into him, and just comes with more reps over time. And that's why I say give him a couple of years to become more versed with the fullback position. Keep him as your tight end 2 in the meantime. He's, again, in the vertical passing game, most of his work that I saw that was exceptional was running up the seam. He just has a way of getting open, and he gets there so quickly. It's a really easy read for the quarterback. And the safety really won't have enough time to drop back because he's so fast. So to me, that's where you're really going to get your meat and potatoes with him. Another really impressive thing, even though he has, I guess, shorter length, he's really good about catching the ball away from his frame with his hands, and kind of plucking it out of the air. That's something that a lot of guys don't have. They're just kind of like catch with their body, maybe catch with their helmet. He's like putting his hands out and making a play that way. So for me, I feel like that would be really, really good in the passing game, because you can trust him to catch things. Ross Dwelly might have the best hands on the team. I think this guy could develop in having hands pretty close to that. I'm going to have a drink of water here real quick, so give me a couple seconds. All right. This is the part where I'm really going to sell Niners fans everywhere. He has awesome contact balance, and his yards after catch is really, really good as well. So he's not just like, I'm going to get open, catch the ball, and get down. He's going to run through you. He's going to run around you. Whatever way he needs to, he's going to get past you. And having a guy like that can take a 10-yard gain into a 25-yard gain, to me, is what this offense is based around. It's really like a West Coast offense, if you think about it. That's what this was born out of. So having playmakers who can make those plays for you, whether it's your first option or your fifth option, is really, really important. And another thing, too, he has a pretty big frame, and he's like kind of slender now, but he can definitely put on more weight and still kind of keep most of that speed, in my opinion. So I think he could benefit from that. But in terms of the negatives, again, he's very raw and he can be undisciplined as a blocker at times. But what you're looking for is, does he have experience and are there enough plays on tape that you think he can translate into a guy who can be a good blocker? And I think so. His route running, it's really like smooth in the sense that it's kind of one tempo. He's kind of rounding his routes a little bit. He's not creating a ton of separation. So to me, that might be worrisome. But as your second tight end, he's not really expected to be that type of guy. So I think he has the traits to become that guy, and that's what you're hoping for. But if he doesn't, like, it's not really that big of a deal because he'll be your fifth option at best on most plays. Now, I talked about his length before. I feel like I can't talk. His arms are a bit short. It's like alligator arms at times. And when he's in line to block, it can kind of mess with things. So, that's not something he can just grow new arms or anything, but yeah. I feel like better technique can definitely help him out. And then the last thing, pass protection, very inconsistent. Plays where you're really happy with it, plays where there's a lot to be desired. So overall, again, the experience he has, the traits he has, the versatility he has, his ceiling is a Kyle Juszczyk type of player. Not saying he'll ever get there, but that's kind of what I see in him.
Yeah, because it sounds like you got him between a tight end and a fullback. And I think that if he can learn anything from Juice, if he's got that capability, it's a win situation. Of course, we got so much going on with that particular room with Juice. You got Charlie Warner. They're still working on him. I don't know how many more things they want him to do between now and then. It could be like some of what you're talking about now. But, it's interesting to see. And guys that come into that position, we're still building depth. So if they can take somebody's job, that's what we want to know anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the thing with him is, like, you don't have to waste a spot on a second fullback because he can be your second tight end on day one and just be the best guy after George Kittle in your room just by stepping in there. So that's the value I see in him is, like, you don't need to waste a roster spot on another fullback or another tight end. He can be both for you. But aside from that, if you're ready to move on, I'm going to move on to pick 187.
Let's do it.
This is a guy who I absolutely love. He's probably number 3 this year, and like my draft crush is behind Bryan Cook. We'll get to number 1 pretty soon. But Velus Jones Jr. out of Tennessee, he is a yak machine. He's built like a running back. He ran a 4.34, I think, at the combine. No, it was a 4.31. It's 4.31 at the combine. He has 2 rockets up his ass. That's the best way to put it. And he's so fast, but he's so physical, and he will not go down without a fight. To me, that's kind of where you look at him and say, he's not the best route runner, and that's really where all of my issues with him stem. It's a pretty big issue, but we'll go into it. But if you just find a way to get him the ball, if you just throw up a go route, if you throw up a slant, maybe get him on a jet sweep, he's going to take 5-yard gains into 15, 20 into 40. Like, this guy is legit in that way. He's not scared of catching in traffic either, or at least being in traffic in general, which is a really big plus. He's kind of like Debo in the sense
I was going to say, kind of sounds familiar.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a lot of similarities there. And I think out of all the guys in this class, maybe Treylon Burks is the only guy that kind of is the same way, where he's very physical and he just will not go down without a fight. But I feel like with him, he's built like a running back, like I said, and you can put him in the backfield as well, to where you don't have to put Debo back there all the time. I feel like his speed is good enough to be a good perimeter runner, and that's really what the team was missing last year. And the reason why they had to put Debo in the backfield, because the outside zone wasn't working, and Mitchell's fast, but he's not super fast, right? So when you need to get to the edge, you just can't get out there. So that's why a guy like him could take some pressure off of Debo Samuel in a way. Now,
and that's an excellent point, Tony. People understand Mostert leaving was a problem. Mm-hmm. Now we've got to readjust what we do in that run game, because Mostert took care of every little problem and issue known to man when you gave him the ball. Now the other team has all the problems, not us.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. The next point about him, this is kind of like a negative and a positive. He's a 25-year-old because he's a 6-year senior. He redshirted his freshman year, and then because of COVID, they gave him another year of eligibility. He spent his first 3 years at USC. So with him, I mean, like, he's 25. Maybe he only gets a second contract and not a third. But he's a 5th-round pick, and ultimately why I think he'll slide this far, maybe even further, because of his age and the fact that his route running isn't very good. And we'll go into that in a minute here. But with the last positives here, again, catches away from his frame. That's one of the most important things for me. Are you catching with your hands, or are you catching with your body? And if you are catching with your hands, can you do it in traffic and be fearless enough to take a hit and still not care? That's to me where he's very similar to a Deebo Samuel. Not only as a receiver, though, in terms of special teams, he's an excellent gunner when he's on the punt team, but he's also a really good kick returner. And there were like a lot of plays on film to where he was just lighting it up on special teams, returning kicks and punts. And that's a guy that I want on my roster. Even though we signed Ray McCloud, you can never have enough guys who can do that type of work. And to me, that's where he really shines outside of the receiver stuff. And the last thing, too, he's a willing blocker. In the run game, he's cool with just, getting his feet down in the dirt, using his hands and pressing you, away from the run. To me, it's really hard to teach that mentality. It can be taught, but you really want to have guys coming in with that mentality as it is. So those are all the positives for him. And again, for a 5th round pick at 187, that is exceptional to have all these different things. But his negatives, really everything aside from being a 25-year-old to me is route running. Rounded routes, doesn't really stem his routes well at all. And what I mean by that is, like, if you're Devontae Adams, whether you're running a 5-yard out, a slant, post corner, anything, you're setting everything up the same way to stem your route to where they don't know where you're going. And it's really hard to predict where you're going. And that's something he really just doesn't do. I think he can learn, but to me, it's kind of tough because I don't want to have a guy who's been in college for 6 years being that raw out route running. So to me, that's worrisome. The one thing I'll say, though, he didn't really play a lot until this past year in terms of starting and getting reps. So on the field, you could say he's still raw as a prospect because he never got to play on the field a whole lot. And I can buy that argument. But with that, too, is a positive in the fact that you're not really treading much off his tires. He still has a lot to give because he hasn't really been used. So that 25-year-old is more like a 23-year-old now because he doesn't really have as much wear and tear. But to go back to the route running stuff, he's a short wingspan and catch radius. And even though he catches balls away from his frame and in contested catch situations, it's really good from what you see out of him. He's automatically going to have, less of an ability than other people simply because he has short arms. Now, aside from that as well, his release package is really basic. And this is where a Deebo Samuel outclasses him by 3 or 4 tiers because Deebo, as a short route runner, his get off the line and his release is top 3 in the league, in my opinion, because he's so good with his short area quickness. And I feel like Velus Jones doesn't really have a lot of that in his game right now. So you can't really line him up anywhere like a Deebo Samuel because of that limitation. If they're pressing him, it's going to be hard for him to do anything. Now, again, you can teach that and he can get a lot better at it, but the natural ability of Deebo is always going to be better than a guy like him. And the last thing I have, a lot of wasted steps running routes to where when you're trying to stem something, you want to have every single step be identical to something you did before and what you'll do after. With him, it's like, okay, if he's running an out, he might take 4 steps. If he's running, a short post, it might be 7 steps. Like, to me, that's where you kind of have to separate him in terms of route running because he really just doesn't have that understanding yet. But he can learn, and that's why I really want to take him. So my comp for him, Devin Duvernay or even a Ray McCloud with more physicality and less route running ability.
Because, Tony, let me get this straight. You said 4-3-1.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if he quite plays the 4-3-1, but he definitely looks like a low 4-3 guy, in my opinion. Or high
even
4-3
4-3-2 or 3. 4-3-1, I always consider that just like you're never going to find that guy. But you know what? Tyreek Hill's got small arms and short arms. I mean, the thing is, I don't know that I need arms on him as much as I need to do exactly what I'd have him do all game long, is just get those defensive backs, scare the bejesus out of them. I want you to just hit that sideline and run for all your worth. Now, I'm going to get him off the line of scrimmage because people are going to get physical with him because they don't want him to get loose, and that's what he's got to learn to deal with. But if I can get him downfield, I've got receivers that can take care of things midfield and intermediates. Yeah. But that guy that's scaring people to death, that's the one I want. We haven't had it since Marquise Goodwin left. This is the guy I'm looking for. We've been talking about this, Big Show. Several of others are talking about where is that one guy that everybody has to respect as far as the speed. He sounds like the guy, and if he's going to drop that low in the draft, I've been worried about that because we're not getting Christian Watson, Tony. No matter how much people dream and pray, he's not coming past the first round, or he's coming high in the second. So, God.
Yeah, with him, like on tape, his deep route ability is real. But again, like when you get to the short and intermediate level where most of his routes will be, that's where I worry a little bit. But I'm going to move on here. It's already 7:45.
All right, go ahead, Tony.
So 221, we traded away pick 220, so we're at 221. This is my favorite player in the entire draft. He's top 3 all time for me. He was such a fun watch. And I did a space with him right before this. I recorded it on Twitter, so you can go ahead and check that out. We had like a big interview with him, a lot of other Niners content creators as well. But his comp is Darren Sproles. I'm going to start with that. And the player's Ezra Gray, running back, Alabama State. When you watch him on film, even when he played against Division I teams like Florida State and Auburn, he was routinely the fastest player on the field. He ran 4.31 in high school, and you can see that on film. I said Velus Jones had 2 rockets up his ass. He has 4. Okay, this guy is crazy fast, and they didn't really utilize him very well at Alabama State. And he even kind of talked to that today, to where he felt like they could have used him in much better situations. So I think the production is a result of his coaches not being very good. He had 5 offensive coordinators, and that really plays a role where you can't really ever get continuity with your team, and they didn't really use him very well, and that's why they were being fired year after year. So to me, like, his production doesn't matter, because when you saw him play, he would take negative 3-yard gains and he'd just put a move on dudes who were in his face, who were like 230, and get around them, and then he gets like 25 yards. If you want to watch a game, Jackson State 2020, that's the one I would watch with him. But again, 4.31 in high school. He's insanely fast. He'd be perfect for the outside zone, being that perimeter runner. His contact balance, he's 5'8", he said. And he says he walks around at 185. I feel like maybe he could get to 190. And he said that he probably could earlier today as well. But for a guy his size, that small, guys bounce off of him. And that's really impressive, because you wouldn't expect a guy that small to have that type of contact balance, but he does. It's really, really good. He just finds a way to stay up.
It's all about balance, and in that weight, it comes in impact a lot different than people might imagine. I've already played against guys like that, and I hated it. You got to hit him around the ankles. If he crunches any distance whatsoever, now he's going to use you for a snow plow. So that's why, those guys are really at 185. He goes to 190. He's like, God, it's tough to bring down.
Exactly, and like, to me, there's a lot of Raheem Mostert in the sense that he gets to the outside, but he has good contact balance. Again, Raheem isn't my comp, but you can see similarities, in that type of way that their traits are set up. Outside of that, he has really quick feet. He cuts on a dime. He's unpredictable. His jump cut, when he puts it together, is so good. Now, there were a couple times where when you jump cut, you have a stop foot and a go foot, right? So your stop foot is really where you're planting. Your go foot is where you're going to lead off to. If they aren't even, your burst is going to be greatly affected. So the first time I saw him jump cut, his feet were like this, right? So it's like, okay, he didn't have burst, but I can see why that happened. Every other time after that, his feet were even, and he just jump cuts on a dime, and it's so hard to stop.
That's coordination. That's natural ability. You can't teach that. Does he look better than JaMycal Hasty doing that?
No, he, to me, can replace JaMycal Hasty and what's his name? Trey Sermon. He can replace both of them right away. So, yeah. Along with that, he has really good patience, but he's a quick decision maker as well. Kind of like a Le'Veon Bell when he used to be in the league, to where he'll wait for his blocks, but the second he sees a crease, he's gone, right? Yeah, and that's what you want to see out of running backs. And when you have 5 offensive coordinators, his ability to adapt, to me, not only to the playbook, but in the game as well, was incredibly impressive. So to me, Ezra Gray, in terms of his running game, it's awesome. But to me, he didn't really get a whole lot of targets in college, but he has the ability to be a slot receiver. He came into Alabama State hoping to be a slot receiver type of guy, but they made him a running back. But he has the ability, in my opinion, to just win out of the backfield, and you can motion him into the slot like they want to do with Hasty. Aside from that, really good on special teams. A lot of kick returns, a lot of long kick returns, and even some touchdowns. And that's really where he's shining against Auburn with this kick return touchdown, and he was the fastest player on the field. So to me, he's the perfect package. You get everything, really, except for falling through 8 guys like a Derrick Henry, but you don't really need that, in my opinion, for this type of offense.
You know, Tony, like Ben Chu says, those lightweight, speedy, short players don't usually last long in the league. Tony, every year we go through a whole tissue box full of running backs. There's really nothing we can do, though. Nothing that can be done. The size of the running back doesn't seem to matter. They're going to go down at a certain. They're going to go down at a certain rate every year. We're going to start the year off with a room full, and we'll be lucky to have 2 left at the end of the season. This is just the way it's going to be, though. So,
Yeah, I
your
mean,
feeling
you have
on
to
that,
live
right?
with it.
Yeah, it's just nothing that can be done about that.
But with a guy like him, you're not expecting him to be a bell cow, like maybe 10 to 15
Anyway.
touches a game, and that's what you want. And he can have 100+ yards from scrimmage with that workload. That's what I look, because I don't want to have, just a bell cow like Mitchell was last year because it wasn't effective. I'd
And it
rather
killed
have
him.
a committee. Yeah, exactly. He missed like 7 games because of it. I want
And
to
he
have a
was slowing
committee.
down after a while, too. He wasn't the
He
same as
got
he was when
slow
he
toward
first
the
came
end of
in.
the year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really, that's where I kind of I love Ezra Gray because I'm not expecting him to be that guy. I could see him going as high as the 4th round. I have an early 4th round grade on him just because of his size and his durability concerns because of his size. But again, you take him in the 6th round, he becomes this player. Everyone's talking about how good of a pick he was because he panned out, right?
Right.
So aside from that, I went over all the negatives in terms of production, but that isn't his fault, in my opinion. You put him on Alabama, he's averaging 6 yards a carry, probably being the best back on the team. Maybe not in terms of workload, but in terms of efficiency. And then really the only 2 things that I have for him is ball security issues. He had 4 in 2019, but the past 2 years he only had 1. And the one that he had in 2020 was against Jackson State, and I really don't fault him for that one. You can watch the play. It ended up being a safety because of the way the line blocked. But to me, he's improved in that category, so we'll monitor how that goes. In pass protection, he could be better, but he's really improved over the last few years. And he said that coming out of high school, he never really had to do that. So coming into college, it was a really new thing for him, and you can see the growth on tape. So for me, he was the academic Heisman finalist in 2020, off the charts good as a student. Listen to him talk today. He has really good perspective on everything in life, and he has a backup plan outside of football. So to me, he's like a very well-rounded person as well, and that's why I would love for the Niners to take him. He said they haven't met with him yet, but I hope that changes. So that's it for Ezra Gray. I
And
really
Jen
love
and
him.
Lynch will really appreciate that, too. But the thing is about that being able to pass protect, remember Matty B, and actually JaMychal Hasty, they struggle a little bit with that as well. You don't put him in on those downs. I used to question when Kyle would do that, but it's hard to question Kyle because Kyle is Kyle. And what right do I have to question him? It's Kyle. It's
Yeah.
3rd and 5, Kyle. What is he doing in the backfield anyway? Anyway, don't get me started. Let's go ahead and
Yeah.
continue.
I agree. So yeah, he's like my favorite player by far this year, one of my favorite players ever. But we're gonna go to our last guy, pick 262,
Right.
Alex Wright, Alabama at Birmingham is where he went to college. To me, he could be gone by 150. He could go undrafted again. Another trade-based prospect, and that's what you're really drafting really late. He has good foot quickness and agility, flows with mobile quarterbacks who are escaping the pocket, so he can be like a spy type of player if you need him to be. He's that athletic. He has a really long frame with good speed, not Amari Barno type speed, but definitely better than average. And he just, when you watch him, you can see the talent on film. But again, he's getting picked this late because there are negatives. His IQ, very lackluster, and I feel like he doesn't have very good instincts either, which, again, you don't need to be a great instinct player. But if you come into the 49ers organization, you're really looking for talent that they can develop outside of that. Now, in terms of taking on blocks, he had issues against Georgia against their tight ends, which is concerning. But again, maybe you move him to the inside, you beef him up a little bit, and then you let him work from there. Again, he has a long frame, so if you make him like an Arden Key type player, maybe you can get more value there out of him. But he's still very raw in terms of his technique. His hands are pretty weak in terms of like chopping offensive linemen's arms off of him. That was really, lackluster. And again, this is why he might be undrafted. And then aside from that, he's a straight-legged rusher. His base, or I guess like his core of gravity is really high because he's not bending his legs a whole lot. You want to see them get down low and use their, center of gravity to their advantage to push guys off their block. He doesn't do that. So again, a trade space prospect. He can really improve in a lot of ways, but I'm not really hoping he'll be anything at 262. Just kind of have to take a flyer and hope he's good.
Yeah, because that's that Mr. Congeniality thing at the 7th round anyway. But Tony, you make a lot about the the intelligence level or the IQ of ball players.
Mhm.
You know, I'm trying to think of, have we ever really drafted a guy that we might have thought wasn't really sharp? I think back, other than Reuben Foster, that's the only guy I can think of that I question his ability to think.
Akella Witherspoon, possibly.
Oh, but the thing is about Spoon, you know his academic history, right?
Yeah, but Ezra Gray was saying today that like a lot of guys, even if they're book smart and they're really good that way, it doesn't always translate
Make it
to
to
the
a
football
football
field.
player.
Yeah.
But you know, but the thing is, his brain is not small. I always look at guys like that, and I think because Spoon could have went in a lot of different directions. He didn't need to play football. So you know, when guys like that, I suspect looking into a playbook, grasping concepts and things like that, it shouldn't be difficult. You know, and so I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, and I think Kyle and John, when they sit a player down and interview him, they're asking those penetrating questions to see just how sharp this kid is. So,
Exactly. But yeah, that's all I have for this draft. I'm open to questions now. I'm looking through from the beginning. I haven't seen any yet. If you see any, let me know.
yeah, I didn't really see any questions either. I saw comments. The one I did mention about was the smaller running backs. Guys, if you have any question for Tony, you might bounce it up there now. We got a couple of minutes to go here, and see what we can do with that. Because but I do like your draft as usual. The seventh round pick is always like a crapshoot. At that point, you could
Mhm.
get lucky. We've done that in the past. You look at DJ Jones. I'm still not. I don't know what to say about our return, our wide receiver that got hurt 2 years in a row and didn't play. Uh, he didn't play this past year, and he's on his way to New York.
Jalen
Wait a
Hurd,
minute. No, the wide receiver that just
Jalen
left us. He
Hurd.
got no. I'm sorry. 3-4 years ago, we used him as a return guy all the time. I don't know why I can't think of his name. Really
Richie
small guy.
James,
Richie.
Trent Taylor,
No, Richie.
Richie James.
Yeah, that's him. Richie James. I always wondered about him, but we picked him up. Did we pick Richie up in the seventh round?
Yeah,
Yeah. See?
yeah, we did.
So
Mhm.
you know, and actually we got a little production out of Richie. Richie should have probably
Yeah.
got more play time than he really did, because that Green
Mhm.
Bay game, it was kind of obvious that Richie could play a lot better than Kyle was giving him credit for. But he had
Yeah.
guys ahead of him that you weren't going to make them sit down to let Richie play, and understood that too. So
Mhm.
interesting. I'm
Exactly.
going to go down through your draft again real quick here and read that and refresh everybody on that. Tony starts off with a third round pick. Strong safety Bryan Cook out of Cincinnati. Third round pick also tackle Kellen Diesch, Arizona State. Third round pick, number 93, outside line, Cole Strange in Chattanooga. You got to love a school called Chattanooga.
Interior offensive lineman.
Interior offensive lineman. Okay. Third round pick cornerback, Damari Mathis out of Pittsburgh. Fourth round pick at 134. Defensive end, Amari Barno, Virginia Tech. And also fifth round pick, 172. Tight end fullback, Tony, pronounce his name. Is that Chigoziem?
Yeah, I call him
Chigoziem.
Chig.
Yeah, they call him Okonkwo. Where is he?
Okonkwo.
Is he a Polynesian?
I have no clue. I think he's more like native African type. I don't know. He might be Polynesian. I didn't really look that far.
No, you're
But he
right.
doesn't look Polynesian.
No, you're right. I think that's an African name. Right. Sixth round pick, 187, wide receiver, Velus Jones Jr. Blinding. This is a guy with the blinding speed, isn't it? Tony?
What?
This is a sixth round pick, Velus Jones Jr. He's the guy
Oh,
with the
yeah.
speed. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And sixth round pick at 221, running back Ezra Gray, another guy with ridiculous speed. Speed is my thing this year, Tony. I love speed. Seventh round pick, 272, defensive end, Alex Wright, UAB. Tony, I like it as usual, and I like the way you approach the thinking that process that went into picking these players for the reasons you picked them for. Good job. I'm figuring Tony at some time in the future, he'll do whatever, but somehow he'll end up in somebody's front office. Tony, I'm telling you, man, your analytic mind when it comes to football players, it amazes me.
Thank you. Yeah, I think like a lot of people, it looks kind of underwhelming in the comments, but what I'll say is like all the players that the media is propping up that you know about, most of them really don't pan out. And it's a lot of the guys that you never hear about through the draft
Absolutely.
process that really become something.
Every
So
year.
I'm going off of like what I've seen and stuff that I've, looked at, not what the media thinks is good. And there's people who agree with me, like Chris Sims, for example. I've liked Bryan Cook for a while, but he came on, I think this past week and said he wouldn't be surprised if he's picked between 20 and 40. So there's obviously people who agree with those assessments. I'm not asking everybody to agree with me, but just understand that everybody's taken for a reason. And I'm not the only one who feels a certain way about a lot of these players. So
Yeah. I mean, scouts comb the nation all year long, and they come out and they come back and make suggestions or make recommendations, and it ends up being a dud. Tony, in fact,
hold on.
that
Hold on.
go ahead.
Chris Scholl said, I like Cook, but I'm not taking an unathletic box safety as my first pick. I don't know what you're watching. He is very athletic, and he has the range to play all over the field if you need him to. So I don't really understand that comment.
All right.
I feel like a lot of people group box safeties in with each other, but he's not just a box safety. He has the coverage as well.
Yeah, Tony, you know what? Because Talafunga is pretty much that. I always wondered, Talafunga has instincts and things like that work really well for him. We did see him get beat going downfield. From what you're saying about Bryan, he doesn't get beat. Is that right?
He really doesn't. Like, I comped him to Tart because if you ask him to be on someone, he'll lock them down most of the time. The main issue is like, is he going to make a play on the ball? And you can teach that stuff, right? But you can't teach a guy how to be that tight-hipped, I guess. So I didn't really understand that comment, to be honest.
Yeah, that's good. Well, he seems to think that you got to swing for the fences when you got a young quarterback. But those are, Chris, those are anytime you make a pick, it's a risk anyway. The draft is a shot in the dark, basically. You're looking at all the traits. If a player checks all the boxes, you got to go with it, with your instincts on that and your gut. Instead of just at face value taking players. So I get where I get where both of you are coming from, though.
I feel like, especially when you're that late in the draft, it's more important to take who projects the best at the NFL, not just like who has the best talent possible. And there were picks like Amari Barno where it's like he has awesome talent, but I don't know if he'll ever put things together. With Bryan Cook, he's a very safe pick, but he also has the ceiling to be even better than Tart is. And I know Chris Sims comped him to Harrison Smith, which is football royalty almost. But to me, like, Bryan Cook is so underrated, and people think just because he played on a championship type of defense that it was because of the guys around him. But there were routine examples of people being out of position, but he's doing the right job and he makes a play. So to me, I get where you're coming from. Just because his talent isn't as high as a Lewis Seen or Jaquan Brisker, but he's right below that, and he will be an above-average starting strong safety in the NFL, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of these guys, their game translates better than the NFL than it does what you saw in college. I still can't get over Elijah Mitchell. Who knew he was going to come in and take the second? We picked up Trey out of Cincinnati. We picked him up. We traded. The 49ers, when they trade up for people, it's always frightening.
Mm-hmm.
Who have we traded up for?
Go ahead.
I'm trying to remember. Who did we trade up for that's worked out so well?
Nobody. Trey Lance is probably the only guy that we might think of, but like Akella Witherspoon, C.J. Beathard, who else? There are a couple guys. I think
Reuben Foster.
Foster, we traded up for him. Ayuk is going to be really, really good this year. Him and Trey Lance
worked out.
Yeah. But like those are the only two guys
Dante Pettis, everybody's favorite, traded up for him.
Oh my God.
So our record,
I don't like him.
I know. Our percentages are not doing good. So, hopefully, because if they're going to trade up this year, I noticed, you didn't do a lot of manipulation with the trades, though, as I expected you would. Enough. But you didn't go, because Tony's had trades where he ended up with 100 picks. So, so this is kind of low key for you, Tony. I like it, though.
Yeah. When I was like 14, 15, I was like, I just want to get every single point exactly to where it is on the trade value chart and get as many picks as possible. But the more you realize, like, teams use it as a reference, and that's where you have to start, but it's not always going to be equal, right? And there might be a little bit of, disparity because a player really wants to be, taken by a certain team, they want to move up for him, it doesn't mean that they won't overpay a little bit. So
Yeah.
I kind of had to get more acquainted with that and being more realistic about the amount of picks I have. But I'm going to address what Chris said. I don't dislike any player he took. I just want high ceiling guys and a deep threat early for Trey.
Mm-hmm.
What I'll say to that, they got Ray McLeod. Velus Jones Jr. absolutely has the ability to beat guys over top. So I don't think you need an early guy, because to me, Ayuk, he got deep so much last year and got open when he went deep. Jimmy never threw to him, right? And so I think he will be a good deep threat, better than Debo, in my opinion, just because he's more well-versed in deep route running. So I don't think it's as big of an issue as people are making it out to be. Most of the players I took are high ceiling guys like Cole Strange, Amari Barno. I think Velus Jones Jr., again, a high ceiling, Alex Wright. So there were a lot of guys I took with that. Just important to balance it and make sure that you're taking the guy that you think will translate best to your scheme. So with the needs at strong safety and right tackle, we don't have definitive starters there. Those needed to be addressed quickly, and I'd rather use that pick on them than a receiver, because there are a lot of good receivers in this draft. It's way harder to find a Velus Jones type, level safety in the third round than it is to find a wide receiver Velus Jones in round 5. So that's where I stand with that. I respect his opinion. I just have a different philosophy.
No, and I do think the 49ers are going to find somebody to take the top off. Where they're going to do it is the question.
Even Marcus Johnson, we just signed him. He was a really good deep threat for Tennessee.
And I think that's why they got him, because they know what we're talking about. The 49ers know they need somebody to get this butt down the field in a hurry. We got guys that run great routes. We got Debo midfield. We got Ayuk who runs great routes. Where's that guy that the defensive backs don't feel? Because defensive backs are not challenged by either Debo or Ayuk. They believe they can run with them. I want that guy that they know damn well they can't run with, and they got a backup. See, that's what I want, and then everything's going to fall into place.
Yeah.
All right, Tony. Good stuff, as I expected. Let's we're going to go and look for you a little later.
For sure. Thank you for having me on. And yeah, again, I spoke with Ezra Gray earlier, so if you want to see that, it's on Twitter. It's a recorded space.
All right.
I was really impressed by him, just the way he carried himself and everything like that. So thank you again for having me on, Ronbo. Hopefully the draft is good this year and we make some good selections. And I'm excited. So again, thank you for having me on.
Thank you for coming on, Tony. We'll talk to you shortly. All right.
All right, for sure. Have a good night.
You too. And with that said, it's time to shout out here. We're getting ready to open up the phone lines for you in just a few minutes as I say, Niners for another win.